All right, next item up, we're going to draw the evolution of vertebrate hearts. And we're going to start with fish. Fish have a single circulation. So a lot of this is going to be rather cartoonish, but we can start off by drawing our fish. There's the mouth end, there's the caudal fin, and we better put in some of our other fins. There's the eye, there's the dorsal fin, there's the anal fin and the pelvic fin, and operculum, and we'll give it a pectoral fin as well. So your standard fish, bony fish. Although the circulatory system of other fishes, also two-chambered heart. So in that one, that two-chambered system with single circulation, we've got one atrium and one ventricle. And so the atrium is the opening that brings the blood into the heart, and it's pumped through the ventricle. From there, it is pumped to, and I'm going to draw, it's going to look like kind of like a bubble. And this blood is deoxygenated. It's going to flow into, get pumped into capillary beds, which is what this is supposed to be. We're going to draw a lot of these kind of Swiss cheese bubbles here. But this is the gill capillary bed. Where it is going to pick up oxygen. And from there, it's going to flow out into all the rest of the body. And we're going to draw a big old Swiss cheese bubble down here. And that's going to represent the capillary beds of the body. So it's going to flow out to all the parts of the fish that are vasculated, carrying that good oxygen and bringing back that carbon dioxide as a waste product. So these would be body capillaries or systemic capillaries. So plus oxygen here, gas is exchanged, minus oxygen there, and that's going to flow back into the heart. Okay, so just to make things a little bit more visual, well, let's see if I can do this, if I have a good, I think this will do nicely. I'll color you. We'll go with this. All right. Okay, so oxygen is infiltrating here in the capillary beds. Just kind of, it's going to go out into the body. And now this is just for exaggeration. You may have heard that oxygenated blood is red and deoxygenated blood is blue. That's not true. That is not true. You would not be able to look at blood and be able to tell whether it had come from, it was venous blood or arterial blood, if it was on its way to the heart or on its way from the heart. So all of the blood that flows through the heart in this single circulatory system is deoxygenated. So not really blue, but for our purposes, we are kind of used to that fiction that that gets the point across, hopefully. Perfect. Okay. So now let's move from a fish with its two-chambered heart and single circulation into an amphibian. We're going to look at a frog, which has double circulation. Our frog is going to be our stand-in for all amphibians, and it's very similar to what we see in the, why don't I make it like, in many of the basal reptiles as well. That's supposed to be a frog face. It's hard to draw frog bodies. And it's smiling because it's happy because it's breathing. All right, so in this case, we have got 3 chambers, 1 atrium, 2 atria, feeding into 1 ventricle. So now we have a 3-chambered heart here because we've got 2 atria and 1 ventricle, which means we've got 3 chambers. Over here, 1 atrium in the fish, 1 ventricle, for a total of 2 chambers. Okay, so blood is going to flow into one of those atria, and it's going to flow out, and it's going to flow through a capillary bed, actually several capillary beds, different capillary beds, because it turns out that amphibians do a lot of their breathing through their skin. So this up here, pumping deoxygenated blood, is the pulmonocutaneous loop. So amphibians may have lungs, often do have lungs. They often start in when they're in their aquatic phase with gills, but then they may develop lungs as they become more terrestrial. So it's on that pulmonocutaneous loop that they pick up oxygen and they return to the other atrium, into the ventricle again, and then that blood is going to be pumped out into the body of our frog. So we'll draw a big old capillary bed down here, which represents the whole body of the frog. So capillary beds, just highly, highly branched, very, very thin blood vessels where gases can be exchanged. All right, so oxygenated blood is going to flow back out over here, and then it's going to become deoxygenated and flow back to the heart. But if you'll notice, if this in this system, you get oxygen being picked up here, but inside this one ventricle, there is going to be some room for mixing of oxygenated and deoxygenated blood. I guess I'm not going to worry about all those little capillaries and what's happening between them. This is kind of a design flaw, in a sense, of the the double circulation where you only have 2 atria and 1 ventricle, because there's no separation in here. And if I wanted to, what color is this? Oh, that seems like just the perfect thing. There's a violet color. So there's actually mixing of oxygenated and deoxygenated blood here in the heart. So it is good enough and has been good enough for hundreds of millions of years to keep frogs smiling, fat, and sassy. But there is a better way we will find out in just a moment here. And that is if we look at a mammal, which also has double circulation. I'm going to draw my barking dog. I'm going to draw him kind of like Snoopy. Mammals have a double circulation, which means we've got 2 atria, 2 ventricles in this case, for a total of 4 chambers. Oh, can you see that? All right. And this is something that we see in not just mammals, but by convergent evolution, we also see it in birds and crocodilians as well. Have a 4-chambered heart. Now, the 4-chambered heart is a little bit different in crocodilians, but we're not going to get into that, how it's different, because they can actually shunt blood to kind of, when they're more inactive, they can kind of act more like they have a 3-chambered heart, and it's less exertion on the heart muscle. But then when they're active, they can turn that shunt off and have like more like a traditional 4-chambered heart. Okay. Enough about that. We're going to have 2 atria and 2 ventricles. And I'm going to kind of show it kind of like this. Okay. So this is going to be the right side, and this is going to be the left side, because it's like we're looking down at the animal that is kind of lying looking face up at us. It's kind of like, imagine like my poor dog was on an operating table and looking up at it. So even though this is my left and this is my right, the dog would be reversed, or whatever mammal this represents. Okay, so we've got 2 atria, a left and a right atrium, and we've got 2 ventricles, a left ventricle and a right ventricle. The right ventricle is a little bit smaller than the left because it doesn't have to pump as far. Okay, so I'm just going to start connecting up the plumbing here. I'm going to make this extend out, and it's going to come back here and put a capillary bed here. All right, so this here is the to give myself room to label very well there. This is the pulmonary artery leading out of the right ventricle. Where is it going? It's going to the lungs, the lung capillary beds. And it's returning to the heart and the left ventricle via the pulmonary vein. And it is in the lungs where the blood gets oxygenated. Okay, we'll color this in a moment. And then we've got, so this is the only artery that carries deoxygenated blood away from the heart. And the pulmonary vein is the only vein that carries oxygenated blood to the heart. Okay, so then we've got this great biggest artery in your body. Arteries carrying blood away from the heart. And that would, of course, be the aorta. And the aorta branches off into arteries and into arterioles And eventually, this represents the whole body of the animal down here. This particular Swiss cheese bubble. Connect it all up. Into the systemic or the body capillary beds. Where the blood is going to drop off its payload of oxygen. And it's going to flow back through venules into veins. And eventually it's going to drain back into the right atrium through the vena cava. And the vena cava is actually got two branches to it, one of which empties from the head and kind of the upper part of the body. That's called the superior vena cava. And then the other part of the vena cava is emptying from the rest of the body. That's called this inferior vena cava. But let's not worry about that. Let's worry about coloring in our blood, making sure our oxygenated blood is flowing out after being oxygenated in the lungs, dropping off its payload of oxygen, carbon dioxide becoming more abundant in the blood. All right, so then deoxygenated blood flows into the right atrium, into the right ventricle, out that pulmonary artery, and voila. Okay, so one more thing to kind of tell you about mammal hearts, which is that you've got, on one side, you've got a bicuspid valve, just two lobes to the valve that is between the atrium and the ventricle. On the right side, you've got a tricuspid valve, or a three-lobed valve. How do you remember that? It's easy if you can only remember what you're doing in the lab, which is dissecting a lab rat. Left atrium is bicuspid. The right atrium is tricuspid. All right, so there you go. Circulation and the evolution of it in different vertebrates.